All right, how should we approach some of these ambiguous backfields going into week 7? And I mean, I'll highlight them off the top here. I mean, everyone's talking about the Rico Dowdle, Chuba Hubbard situation, including you on this show the other day, including us earlier in the week. So I don't think we need to spend maybe too much time on that one. But, Dowdle goes out, he puts up those back-to-back 200 scrimmage yards games. Really looks fantastic, right? There's no way around it. I know the matchups were easy, but it puts up bigger numbers than we've seen from Chuba. And Hubbard still dealing with the calf injury, limited in practice this week through the first 2 games. He's not practicing in full. He said he expects to play. Shout out to producer Colin for sending the tweet today about Hubbard out there breaking down the huddle the last 2 days. That's another data point to consider. I mean, he's a captain on the team. They view him very highly. But again, we can't read too much into things like that coming out of practice, because I could make the case either way on something like that, right? I could make the case that him breaking down the huddle is him out there and the team out there reaffirming that he is that number one guy. Or you could go the other way. You can make a case that like maybe that's the coaching staff giving him like a little consolation prize, because it's like, hey, buddy, you're still the guy, but we're going with Dowdle this week because you're not 100% healthy. And that's kind of how I think in the short term in this game, it's going to work out. I do think I'm ranking Dowdle ahead of him. I'm ranking Dowdle as a low-end RB2. Chuba Hubbard as a high-end RB3. I think Dowdle gets more work in this game because they don't have to rush Chuba back. And a calf injury is a scary injury. That's something you could aggravate. That's something that could turn into other things, that could turn into injuries that might even put him out for the year. So there's no reason to rush him back and give him this big workload if Dowdle is playing that well. Long term, though, what is it going to mean? And I think this is going to be close to a 50-50 backfield, and it's going to be very, very frustrating for fantasy. I think we talked about it a bit on Monday, right? Like, if you have both these guys playing well and Dowdle earning more of a role, do we go into games where it ends up being a little bit of a hot hand approach? Do we go into games where we think it's going to be Chuba Hubbard and it ends up being Rico Dowdle who goes off? Yeah, that might happen, but I think it's going to be a lot closer to 50-50 than what we saw earlier in the season before Hubbard got hurt. So this weekend, I'm still okay playing Dowdle, putting him in your lineup, and we're going to monitor. We'll see if we get anything from beat writers, any quotes from the coaching staff or from the players to try to figure this out for sure going into the weekend. But even that, I mean, we had reports last weekend from a bunch of different writers that ended up being kind of misleading. And I don't think it was the writers trying to mislead us either. They were trying to make educated guesses and got it wrong, or they might have got information that just straight up wasn't correct from someone around the team, right? And I'm referring to Hassan Haskins being the lead back with the Chargers, which didn't work out that way. I'm referring to, Michael Carter not starting for the Cardinals, and then he actually ends up starting, even though Bam Knight did get more work in that game. But it's a reminder. I had friends messaging me, asking me about that stuff, and I'm trying to parse through it like everyone else and trying to give some clarity. And it's just a reminder, just because we get certain reports, you have to be mindful who it's coming from and actually what the report is and whether it's coming from a place where it seems very concrete or whether it seems like it's a little bit of speculation. And, beat writers and national writers, they're all capable of getting it wrong sometimes, like we all are, right? So just keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out your fantasy lineups. But when it comes to the Panthers backfield, I do think Dowdle is okay to play this week. But I think long-term, it's going to be unfortunate because we might not see the same ceiling from either of these guys because they're going to be splitting this backfield more.
Yeah, I mean, and just on the point about, well, two things. One, on Chuba Hubbard being a captain, shout out to Bruce, one of our listeners on Twitter, did let me know, corrected me on this because I said it yesterday too. The Panthers actually have like a rotating fourth captain spot, and Chuba was a captain 1 week. So I said the same thing yesterday. But it's like, I mean, we're splitting hairs here. He still was a guy they decided to make a captain.
Leader in the locker room. The coaching
he's a
staff
leader
is
on, yes, 100%.
When he got the new contract last year, they talked about him being like a guy who sets the example for everyone else there.
Oh, even before the contract. So, yeah, they love him 100%. So, I mean, either way, but just want to be completely accurate here. Yeah, technically he is not a full, because I said it yesterday. So shout out to Bruce for correcting me. But
has been a captain.
He has been a captain in one of those rotating captain spots. Rico Dowdle, what's his captainship? We need to track that for the rest of the season. How many huddles is he breaking down? I love where we're tracking. We've gone from off-season tracking reps in the order, and now we're tracking who's breaking down the huddle. Fantasy Twitter has jumped the shark. That is for sure. Okay, the other thing I wanted to say about just your point about the reports from last week. I said this with Chris Allen on Sunday. And it informs this backfield here too, especially for this first week. Sometimes these reporters say things that, yes, like the team intends. I think it's very possible that the team on Saturday was maybe like the Chargers was thinking Hassan Haskins is going to be our lead back because what we've seen in practice this week. But then Kimani Vidal, either in warmups or even early on in the game, it's like, oh, this is clearly our hot hand. We're going to keep riding that hot hand and we're going to go over and over again with this guy. And I think there's a real chance in Carolina here. Maybe Chuba Hubbard comes in. He's not full go this week, even if fully participating in practice or he's limited participant in practice or whatever. And they see him out there in the cast, like kind of responding a little weird. They dial it back on him, and then it's just full on Rico Dowdle. That doesn't mean it's going to be full on Rico Dowdle every game the rest of the way. This is kind of a moving target. Boone, fantasy, as we know, you and I know, but not everybody talks about it this way. It's not like a predetermined outcome that we're trying to guess right. It's a moving target, So I think that's very clear with this backfield. But I'm generally with you that I'm comfortable ranking both these guys in startable range this week. It's just kind of based on those expectations. And I feel better about Rico, obviously, with what we have seen recently.
Yeah, and maybe the same could be said in terms of ranking guys in a startable range about the next two, right? Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time discussing this backfield, and it really sounds like the beat writers there are suggesting that part of the reason for this like weird usage, or at least what I would call weird usage, since one guy seems more effective than the other, is that they're trying to make sure that Kenneth Walker stays healthy for the whole season, that they have him and we don't have another situation where he gets hurt again, which makes a lot of sense from a real life standpoint. And yet fantasy managers are of course going to hate that. Right. And then I'm sure you saw, I think it was the Dan Graziano, like a Buzz article that he writes every week at ESPN.
Yeah. It's him or Fowler, right? I can't remember.
Yeah. He talked about how, there's like this funny kind of line about the actual success running the ball wasn't as important to the team as demonstrated willing to continue to run the ball and avoid turnovers. And that's why they went with Charbonnet over Walker more in that game. I mean, again, one of those frustrating things. And I hate this line, but like, it kind of is what it is at this point, that it seems like we're going to get this kind of split moving forward. It's going to continue to have me ranking Kenneth Walker in that low-end RB2, high-end RB3 range, and Zach Charbonnet in that same range. Walker will always be ahead of him in my rankings because I think Walker has the better chance to explode and have big plays and potentially put up big yardage totals. But Charbonnet is going to hang around in there. He's going to score some touchdowns, and they're both going to be usable for fantasy, and yet the ceiling for these guys is just not going to be the same at all, I don't think, at least to what I thought it was going to be before the season.
Yeah, I just think to me what needs to change in Seattle is less so the split between these guys, and because they're the most run heavy team in the league, and yet from a success rate standpoint, they're 24th in the NFL in overall rushing success rate right now. They need to get better running the ball as opposed to they need to give Kenneth Walker more work. Now, you could argue they give Kenneth Walker more work, then they're going to be a better run game. At the same time, though, you said like all fantasy managers are going to hate the fact that Kenneth Walker's not getting all these touches. They're also going to hate the fact if he gets 20 touches a game and he gets hurt 3 weeks later. And then they're going to be pissed about that. So it's just tough. And this is what I expected this backfield to be split between these two guys. It's been a little more even than probably I expected. So I wouldn't say I fully got this one right, but at the same time, I think it's very live, Boone. This Seattle team is good. And maybe December is Kenneth Walker's month, right? Where like, all right, we've got him fresh enough. Now it's time to just start letting him cook. The run game really comes together. It's still a new offensive staff there. So I'm still advising patience with Kenneth Walker, and you just got to kind of live with that volatility. But I want to see this whole run game get better. So I'm just trying to bring some balance to the Kenneth. Not that you aren't doing this, but I think the rest of fantasy Twitter is not doing this. I'm trying to bring a little balance to this Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet split here. And obviously the Seahawks are accomplishing some balance here.
Yeah, I mean, I have teams where I've actually benched Walker. I've been fortunate that I have other options, and I've benched Walker on those teams. But again, I'm holding him for that same kind of reason, that maybe eventually he does get the opportunity. A couple more backfields I want to run through quick. I know we got a lot to get through, but Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears with the Titans. That's one where Tony Pollard not giving us ceiling games. He's only had 2 double-digit fantasy point games this year. Not what we expect from him. Just kind of this boring volume guy. Tajay Spears comes back a couple weeks ago, and last week's game, I mean, he ends up playing more, and it's a trailing game script. And there's some talk, like we said earlier, that maybe Tony Pollard could get traded. I think there's going to be a lot of trailing game scripts for the Titans. So Tajay Spears is somebody that is very interesting. Tony Pollard, just kind of that boring RB3 option. You kind of need him to find the end zone in order to come through for you. Where Tajay Spears, if he ever gets this lead back job, like we saw in the final month last year, he can certainly give us big days and potentially help you win some weeks there. So that's one to keep an eye on. And then the Texans backfield with Nick Chubb and Woody Marks, just worth revisiting. And the reason for it is we saw Woody Marks have that huge game a few weeks back. And then in their last time out before the bye, it was this blowout against the Ravens. They end up using Chubb more. They end up getting other running backs involved later in the game, so they don't even give Woody Marks like that garbage time volume. But coming out of the bye now, they have very tough matchups. Like they have to face the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Broncos. They still have games against the Bills, the Chiefs, the Chargers. They're probably going to be trailing in those games, and I think those game scripts are going to favor Woody Marks. So do not drop Woody Marks. There is still a good chance that he is going to make an impact on your fantasy season.